Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back or welcome to the Sweet Nothings podcast. If you're new here or if you've taken a little while between episodes, just as I unintentionally have, my name is Kelly, and this is your home of relaxed, funny, and informative chats all about the love of eating. We'll talk about the latest food trends, controversial opinions, and all things edible. Today, I want to get into just about what every single food-related conversation in January of every single year, no matter the state of the political climate, the financial crises that we may find ourselves in year upon year, and all of the other very distracting and very important things spiraling around us all of the time, everything in January always comes back to diets, weight loss, and the kinds of New Year's resolutions that punish you and make you enter the year with nothing more than hunger instead of actually looking forward to anything, and reiterating why this is never a good idea. It's rarely any kind of long-term change, and why you should focus much more on taking care of yourself than worrying so much about what strangers on the internet or on the street may think of you. Speaking from lots and lots of experience in January's past and every other month of the year as an eating disorder survivor and someone who puts the love of food above the love of most things, especially above the love of the opinions of other human beings when it comes to my diet and my looks, let's talk about it. But before we get into what is always a little bit of a spicy subject, allow me to cover myself with my old lady blanket and talk about the only food trend that has utterly captivated me over the past month. Now, of course, we kind of took a little bit of a break in December. I had planned to record an episode. It just didn't happen, folks. I do apologize if you had been waiting on it. But typically anything in December, all I ever want to talk about is Christmas related food and all of the joy that comes with it. Which for people who do not celebrate or get very tired of Christmas by about the 3rd of December, I imagine would not be particularly fun. But a food trend that stuck out to me above the hustle and bustle of the festive season was the butter candle. I tried explaining this to someone in person the other day, and it felt even more ridiculous than it does explaining it into a microphone for you guys just now. The butter candle is something that, as all good food trends do these days, it was born of social media with dinner parties in mind, with kind of festive gatherings and celebrations in mind. This is a candle, only technically speaking. Essentially, people were melting butter, flavouring it if they were feeling extra fancy. I'd seen some flavoured with kind of fresh rosemary as it was melting, others with black pepper, things like that. The butter was then sieved to get all of those kind of flavourings sieved out. And I imagine maybe any of the milk solids if they went kind of foamy, and then poured into some kind of cylindrical mould. In a couple of the recipes I saw, it was a kind of sliced open Coke can, like a Coca-Cola tin, and they would pour the melted butter into that and then insert something to act as a wick. Now, some people who clearly hadn't entirely thought through their, school food safety courses used an actual kind of wax coated candle wick that you could buy for actual candle making, but most people were suggesting to do this with cooking twine, like the kind of thing you would see a butcher tie up a joint of meat with for roasting or selling if it's the butcher. And then this was kind of chilled until firm. You would remove this from the mold and you would have butter molded into the shape of a candle. You would then light said wick, whether it's a real one or not, and dip your various foodstuffs into the little eventual melted pool of butter that would sit on top. Now, part of me loves the camp, loves the utter lack of necessity for a trend like this. It doesn't really create anything new. It just creates a really inconvenient way to dip things into butter. Because why would you spread it? Why would you simply flavor the butter and pour it liquid into, a ramekin if you're feeling fancy, or a bowl if you're not? but instead to form it into a candle. And, people pointed out the obvious on TikTok. Of course, it was going to be difficult to not put the flame out when you were dunking pieces of bread or crudités into your melted butter. And everyone would have to be very patient, as there would only ever be a small amount of liquid butter available at any given time, much like there would be with liquid wax in a candle. Can these be reused safely? Should they be used at all? What would someone say if you presented them with a butter candle? So many questions and so few answers. But I kind of loved I loved the unnecessary excess of this over the last month, and I couldn't stop myself from watching some of the videos that cropped up on the feed about this. In terms of food news, there's been a little bit more going on. Because it's January, it's perhaps the most nonsensical month of the year for some things, and some positive steps being made in, I was going to say in others, but honestly, looking at my notes here, maybe it's just one. The somewhat kind of positive news for those who care about the climate and care about kind of progress being made in terms of getting rid of single-use plastic. The UK government have introduced a ban on single-use plastic cutlery, plates and trays, in the same way that a ban was introduced on straws several years ago, so you'll now only ever see those paper ones or reusable metal ones. Or in one restaurant in which we had the misfortune of being I'm joking, it was actually a very nice place, they were using wide set pasta tubes as straws. It's been my favourite iteration of the reusable straw so far, to be honest. Figures produced by the UK government in Westminster suggest that 1.1 billion single-use plates and more than 4 billion pieces of plastic cutlery are used in England every year. Now, these, I don't know where these figures are taken from. I don't know how those are measured. And apparently those must just apply to England rather than also Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. But I would imagine this ban would, have the effect of stopping a lot of single-use plastic, which will be a bit of a pain, I imagine, for, some businesses. But in terms of, getting us all used to kind of using and abusing the environment and creating a lot of waste all the time, it might help make us collectively more mindful of these things. So it's certainly not negative news on the whole. Followed by something that seems, if I may, uniquely American to follow the British news here. And I'm sure many of you have probably seen the kind of, I don't even know if I can call this hype. It's more just the Hubble bubble, toil and trouble around this. M&Ms, owned by Mars in the US, have released its first all-female character packaging on one of their M&Ms products, aiming to donate some of the profits to organizations supposedly elevating women. And Fox News in the US has very characteristically, from what I understand of it, responded by calling the purple animated M&M character obese, and the green M&M animated character, and I quote, and I for video viewers at the moment you'll see why, but they have called the green M&M animated character an opportunistic little bitch. I laughed when I first read it. I sent this in a message to someone. I laughed again. Someone, I believe it was one of the female presenters on Fox News, or female, commentators, whatever, pundits, whatever they're referred to as, described this green M&M allegedly as an opportunistic little bitch of a character, which is, for whatever reason, just one of the most ridiculous examples of human behavior I think I've ever seen in my 27 years of life. All of this because an enormous corporation is trying to appear, or at least, trying to be somewhat celebratory of women and organizations doing good things for them. And people being hurt both by this and by the character traits given to an animated character. Truly, even the greatest of fiction writers, I don't think could have kept up with what we have become collectively as human beings. And sometimes I'm quite proud of the chaos of that. Ultimately, I don't even think this M&M's product is a new product. I don't think it's actually a new flavored M&M. I think it's just M&M's in new packaging. So it's not technically even really food news to share with you guys. It's more of an item of political news attached to food stuff. But I couldn't resist reading that quote out loud again. In terms of new products, actual new products in the UK for release instead, a company called, what I believe is pronounced Puck Pip. I don't think I could buy a big enough pop filter, even if I had one on the microphone, for being able to say that without horrendous audio. But Puck Pip has launched a frozen banana product this month. I saw this shared via the grocer on Instagram. They kind of share all these new releases before they're found upon shelves or fridges or freezers in supermarkets near you. And this company, Puck Pip, and its banana product, it's I can't describe it as anything other than literally half of a frozen banana on a stick dipped in chocolate. However, ludicrous as that may sound, and the fact it comes in 3 flavors, would you believe? The whole kind of USP of this product is that it's a low-calorie and, for some, vegan-appropriate treat that does use wonky bananas, or kind of the uglier bananas that wouldn't be accepted by greengrocers, supermarkets, etc., to be sold to the public on their own just based on appearance. Unfortunately, that is something that is very common. Apples or berries or bananas, oranges have to be to very specific sizes and measurements before they can be sold to the general public. So if this does save on waste, it's not entirely loopy, but there's something about the thought of someone selling half a banana on a stick, and because someone will buy this, is just a little bit outrageous, to be honest. Would I buy it to try it? Honestly, probably not. Even my curiosity would lead me to do that. A chocolate dipped frozen banana is a delicious thing while frozen, or allowed to thaw for a few minutes. But there has to come a point where convenience truly is a bit too much. But it is good that they're not putting food to waste. So it's not entirely mad. Similarly, we have technically two new Cadbury products being released this month as well. The white chocolate cream egg is now available everywhere, because now that Christmas is finished, everyone knows it's Easter. And this was a couple of years ago, it might even be 3 or 4 years ago now, the white chocolate cream egg was launched as this kind of prize-winning Willy Wonka style thing, that if you opened a Cadbury cream egg, a regular one, and you found it was white chocolate inside, you could win. I think it was up to £10,000 with it, but now they're just available everywhere all the time. And I've yet to try one, but I've seen a couple of people very much enjoying them, which doesn't surprise me because the cream egg's a real pleasure for a lot of people. I'm very partial to the kind of miniature ones that come in those hero boxes. And Cadbury have also released, or are going to release, something called their Delights bars. Now, this did confuse me initially because I thought there was another Cadbury product called Delights, which I think there is. I don't know if they're sold in the UK in regular supermarkets, but I believe one of the kind of imported Cadbury products are little, almost like digestive or rich tea biscuits sandwiched together with chocolate. And they're known as Delights, or Cadbury Delights biscuits. But these bars are going to be 100 calorie or less than 100 calorie snack-sized chocolate-covered nougat bars. I believe there's going to be 3 different flavors, but the one that seemed to be advertised the most was one that is orange and caramel flavored. Again, obviously, I have yet to taste this. It could be something positive, but there's always something disappointing about a company that's supposed to celebrate chocolate and the joy of chocolate releasing essentially a Weight Watchers bar. But, that's it. That's what they've decided to do. But shifting away from the daft little trends and controversial news that has arrived in January, let's talk about diet culture, folks. Now, I know there are a lot of listeners who are like me, or like I was, have survived or come out of the other side of, or are currently in recovery from eating issues, eating disorders, whether diagnosed, undiagnosed, whatever those issues are. They stretch far and wide and are very, very, at least in my own experience and from having spoken to other people with similar issues, very, very easily set off in January, because you just can't really escape the weight loss content no matter where you look. Even if you have set up this, a kind of social media feed or algorithm that centers away from diet, weight loss, yoga, exercise, New Year's resolutions of masochism. It's difficult to get away from this. You see it on TV, you see it in adverts, you'll see it in ads on your phone. People in the office or people at work will be talking about it. Everyone's always ready to get back on track, back into a routine after the holidays and things, whether it comes to alcohol, cutting back on food, whatever it is. And of course, I don't want to sit here and present however many minutes of your life and mine about people not needing to change, or people should not want to change, or people should not want to improve themselves. I never want to put that forward as the message either. Of course, there are weeks, especially over the winter period. In fact, I've had one of those weeks myself where you end up eating out a lot more, or you end up eating and especially drinking a lot more alcohol than you expect, or than you'd plan to, or than you normally would. And, sometimes it can start to feel not so great in your body, but you also, I think, with time, should learn to treat that as just one of those weeks, as I'm doing currently, and not to treat it as something that then has to be, rubber band snapped back into restriction and punishment and, cutting back from all of the lovely joy you've felt and tipsiness you've felt over the weeks or months previous, whatever it is, and, stripping back to living like a monk. It's not good for brain or body to do so quickly. Or to do so at all, really. Finding that balance and being able to allow yourself to have those weeks or those days or those months. Some people have those years. I think we all have those years at some time, where things aren't exactly where you would like them to be, or they don't feel as healthy or as comfortable or as fit or as nourished as they should. But that's not something to punish yourself for. And while I think, speaking as someone, as I'm sure many of you guys listening are as well, speaking as someone who lived through the kind of insane diet culture of the noughties of kind of 2000 to 2010 especially. Of course, this was present in the 1980s in different forms and in the 1990s, but there was something uniquely vicious about the culture around weight loss in the noughties that did start to die down a little bit in the kind of 2010s. And, we've learned a lot more about, mental well-being and things in the 2020s so far, thank God. But something about the viciousness, about the violence and the aggression and the kind of tearing down attitude of, and almost the penance that you were expected to pay in the noughties for, God forbid, carrying some weight that you didn't want or that other people thought that you shouldn't want. It was very easily recognizable. You had people like Gillian McKeith on TV. You had shows like Super Size versus Super Skinny or The Biggest Loser, all of these things, it was very much blatant. It was in black and white. But something that upon every year, I spoke about this a little bit last year in the kind of January, the Bursting the January Weight Loss Bubble episode of the podcast from this time last year. We spoke briefly about something similar. That this kind of weight loss and quote unquote wellness content is becoming ever more hidden and sewn into social media and online content and TV and things than it used to be. You kind of need to know what you're looking for to be aware of what's being fed to you sometimes. And I don't say this as some grand conspiracy theorist, but what was, for example, what used to be cringy TV ads with the VHS tapes for certain exercises, or like early Weight Watchers books, clubs, content, and the point system, or everything you walk past in the supermarket being able to be bought in this brazenly branded low-fat version, anything like that, it was fairly obvious that you were looking at, weight loss content or something related to weight loss, to diet. Whereas nowadays, in order to keep selling to the people that lived through that decade and previously, and to keep selling to younger and even more tech-aware generations, like my own and those that will come after me, as well as the older ones that, have lived through decades and decades and decades of this stuff and are just really tired of it. Companies have to get more creative to get round this. You couldn't just try and sell someone the Atkins diet in 2023. And instead of producing a kind of blatantly obvious diet, as I said, like Atkins or Rosemary Conley or Jenny Craig or Slimming World, you'll be sold instead, as we spoke about last year, a lifestyle. Or you'll be sold wellness, or you'll be sold, even worse, technology. We spoke about some ridiculous kind of breath measuring thing, I believe, on the podcast last year about that very kind of thing. But as an example, and again, I don't want this to be misconstrued, think about the kind of non-ethics motivated brand of veganism. Of course, veganism is something that's been on the rise for over 10 years now, and it's something I've dabbled in myself based on ethics. It's something that a lot of people commit to because they see what the meat and dairy industries are like, and they just decide they don't really want to be a part of that anymore. They don't want to put their money towards it, at least, or they try their best not to. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of thinking. It's a moral code that people stick to, but there are a lot of people, and they're quite easily spotted online, I think, who go for veganism, or say high raw veganism, the kind of people who only eat raw foods until 8 p.m. or until sunset, whatever it is. They live on bananas and papayas, and only in the evening do they allow themselves to cook some rice if they want to treat themselves. Think of even horrendous terms such as flexitarianism, also known as just being a normal person. Think about intermittent fasting, about the keto diet, and what's now known, not even so much as the keto diet, but the carnivore diet. And you can see how, while these aren't diets in the kind of capital D, easily sold package that you would have seen with the Atkins or the South Beach, these are all instead given a kind of a moral code, or they're given something that will change your whole life and uproot the way you even think about things, let alone the way that you cook or eat. And one that's been incredibly kind of obvious to me this year, the past couple of years as well, but more so than ever this year, and popularized by celebrities and commentators, people online, is this kind of return to our ancestors' way of eating. The return to ancient ways of preparing food and eating. You'll see examples of this with, the people who you'll see living on raw meat, or they'll eat kind of the nose to tail way of eating an animal, which there isn't something inherently wrong with. We should ideally waste as little food as possible, especially if something has been killed for it, in my own opinion. But, the kind of people who will eat only kidneys as a meal, or chomping down even on sticks of butter in TikTok videos rather than just, making a slice of toast. Because these people do exist. Or people who, I've seen someone wash down a meat-filled breakfast with cream, with like unpasteurized cream as a drink afterwards, Think of this Liver King guy who's been all over social media. This guy, he was kind of publicly proclaiming that he was following this carnivorous diet that our ancestors followed. He was going back to the roots of humanity. This kind of primitive way of eating, nose to tail ingredients, saying that it was a superior way to eat, and paying a respectful homage to our primitive ancestors. But it's also come out recently that this guy, despite saying that his body was allegedly due to all of this diet and all of the exercise he was following, and he was this vision of health and insanely muscular, like the kind of muscles that would take a full-time job to maintain. But it's recently come out that this guy has allegedly been admitting to using steroids, whether in the past or now. And he also allegedly has his own range of supplements to support this holier-than-thou ancestral diet, which is nothing new. He's not the only person who's done this, but it just bears remembering, and this comes up a lot. Is it not somewhat glaring you in the face that if the person selling you the diet also needs to sell you the supplements to be able to support your immune system and your body to even function through a day while on this diet, that it's maybe not the best one? Just to offer that. And even more kind of brain bending than that, you'll have people selling ancient or entirely natural, chemical free ingredients to you in the form of a kind of high margin product instead. Like something you'll see in a lot of these what I eat in a day videos on TikTok from certain kinds of influencers. Will see their day started with warm lemon water, fine, but then followed with some kind of drink made with greens powders or chlorophyll drops, um, claiming that something is evidently healing and natural despite being sold in an overpriced dropper bottle or a kind of pre-workout size powder tub is bold, in my opinion. But this is just another example of things that are staring you in the face of a packaged product that isn't as obvious as telling someone, hi, you should lose weight, or hi, your diet's a mess, you should do this instead. Instead, these are just kind of insidious little product placements for these things that are doing exactly the same thing that the diet products and the low-fat yogurts of the noughties did, And I think all I'm trying to say, rather than just sounding like some horrendous, cynical nihilist, as I can often sound in these conversations, or I don't mean to, and I don't wish to drag anyone into that, but I think all I mean by this kind of topic is ask yourself before being drawn into any of it, as I'm sure many of you would without needing me to tell you, because who am I? But the question I always have to ask myself with a lot of things, and the question we should all ask ourselves before being drawn in by this kind of stuff, especially online when everything seems relatable and, these are people just like you. The question to ask is, who is really benefiting from it? Could you benefit from having more vitamins in your diet? Could you benefit from eating more protein? Arguably, yes. I don't think many people would see that as a bad thing. But who is benefiting the most from you splashing out your hard-earned cash on these things, or from keeping your eyeballs on this content? I always think back to that popular quote from wherever it came from, related to, how many industries would go out of business if we all woke up one morning and decided we were all fine with the way we look. And this can be, applied to either the eating disorder riddled world of bodybuilding and, in men's cases, or the kind of plastic surgery and starvation riddled world of wellness for women. Take your pick. It's the same industry repackaged in pink and blue, really. And of course, it isn't always as obvious as it used to be, because as we become more kind of savvy as to what these marketing techniques are, and once we realize that the kind of diet industry or the diet culture of what it used to be 20, 30, 40 years ago doesn't really work in the long term, marketing has to become smarter as we become smarter to it, obviously. Otherwise, the marketing team probably wouldn't really keep their jobs for as long as they do. And again, obviously, this isn't kind of to suggest that we all stop caring about how we look after ourselves and caring about nourishing our bodies and live in bloated hedonism 24/7, because that's not very fun or healthy either. It would be for the first week, but after that, it would just be suffering, to be honest. If you're someone who is listening that wants to or has been advised to lose weight for your own well-being, there are, of course, gentle and healthy and informed and, dare I say, normal ways to do so that doesn't need to involve parting with your hard-earned cash to give it to someone who is neither qualified nor particularly working in your best interest, There are 100 times as many damaging, imbalanced, and entirely subjective ways to lose weight, to be healthier, to turn your life around. And we need to be careful of those collectively and individually. And also, of course, these days, never forget that social media sites, if you use them, will feed you the occasional thing that you don't want to see, or that you don't particularly like to see. But you can also freely scroll straight past these kinds of harmful videos or recommendations. It doesn't make it right that they do this, but they are companies that have advertisers that pay them to present their adverts on these sites. You're going to see some things you don't want to see, just like I sometimes see things I don't want to see promoting products or diets or things that, you know, are designed to make you dislike yourself and want to change yourself and want to change everything about yourself so that you can feel better finally. But always remember that you are the one in power in making these decisions. Vote with your money and vote even with your eyes and with your scrolling these days. It's of course a good thing. I think that from my personal perspective, though I would of course love to welcome your opinions and your views on this as well, and how you found, whether you are someone who's had issues with eating in the past or issues with weight or diet in general, just how you view this. But to me, it's a good thing the weight loss hysteria of the 90s and the noughties isn't as powerful, but it doesn't really mean that we can totally relax. And it doesn't mean that forms of this hysteria aren't just hidden away better. And reminding ourselves of that, reminding younger girls and boys of that as well, is also incredibly important. Especially in the era of social media and incredibly easily accessible plastic surgery can make these things seem even more attainable than they actually are. You know, a reset, a mindset update can be fun and inspiring and motivating at the start of the year. You know, I've taken part, as I said, related to ethics-related veganism. I took part in Veganuary, the going vegan for a month at the start of the year challenge twice. And I enjoyed the challenge. I enjoyed the creativity that it both inspires and forces, really, as someone who's always grown up eating meat and dairy in a culture full of meat and dairy. I never noticed any physical or mental changes on this diet. I always just enjoyed getting out of my comfort zone, doing something a bit different and exciting, because January can be a bit bleak, you know. It can be a good way to dust off the last year and break your routine up. But I think when it comes to these things, to, you know, also including Dry January, for example, I always think that's a good initiative. But to be cautious of people that are ready to take your money or a lot of your time in return for squashing your insecurities in the short term in the hopes of the bikini body, the vacation or the holiday figure that you've been striving for, or, you know, punishing yourself for having enjoyed yourself in December. Exploring accessible exercise, learning to cook and learning to love to cook if you can. Not everyone can, but it's such an important skill in life in general and in looking after yourself independently. I can't emphasize that enough. That doesn't mean being Gordon Ramsay, Marco Pierre White, Anthony Bourdain. But knowing how to look after yourself and to nourish yourself is something I will never stop prattling on about when possible. It's always difficult on a low budget. I absolutely know and understand and empathize with that. But it's something that should always be a priority if you can make it one. Listening to your own body inside and out and doing all of those things in terms of exercise and cooking, and really paying attention to your body based on how you feel, not based on what someone advises you to do or based on what your colleagues are doing or how your sister felt when she did this diet or how your mate felt when he did these exercises in the gym. Listening to yourself, exploring accessible exercise, learning to cook and trying to learn to love to cook in the name of health and longevity is so much safer and just better generally long term than buying some hot 25-year-old affiliate marketing supplements or a very niche diet plan from a very niche illness survivor, as some of these things have become, you know. The human body is incredible. It's an incredible machine, but it can be entirely subjective when it comes to food. Some people, you know, love a food that someone else is deathly allergic to, being a very blatant example of that. Some people will respond very well to a vegan diet and they'll feel lighter and full of energy. Others, like myself, when falling for too long, will see their nails peeling, will find themselves with cold sores and are losing too much weight unintentionally and not in a good or sustainable way. Some people will find themselves on the carnivore diet, giving themselves, the risk of kidney stones long term and, modern scurvy, while some people claim that they thrive on it. You need to listen to your own body as much as possible. A bit like we discussed on the last episode of the podcast when it came to intuitive eating. It's not easy. It's a simple concept, but it's not an easy one. Much like looking after yourself in general. I think we all know the basic principles, but it doesn't mean it's easy to put into practice in modern life. But trying to listen to how you feel, listening to what your body is telling you, whether it's your digestion, whether it's your fullness levels or your hunger levels. Your body sends you these messages. And a lot of the time we don't want to listen to them because it's a certain time of day, or we don't want to listen to them because, we already ate or we already drank enough water today. If your body is telling you that you're hungry or you're thirsty or you're craving certain foods, there's likely a reason for it, even if it doesn't fit into a diet plan or what someone else suggested, all that to say, look after yourselves this month and next month, I think more than any of those that follow, because I know they can be uniquely difficult, and love yourselves. Take care of yourselves as you would take care of a child, of a pet. Give your body what it needs, give your brain what it needs as much as possible, and try not to give into what is essentially companies or individuals selling your insecurities to you this month, or any month, ideally. I hope you all had a wonderful time over the holidays, the festive period, whatever you did or did not do with it. And I hope that this month is going okay for you so far. Particularly, personally speaking, I'm having one of the better Januaries I've ever had. And I hope to continue that theme and not let it drag me down in its dark dreichness as it can. I hope you'll look after yourselves or continue to look after yourselves. Thank you, as always, for listening, and I will see you for the next one.